Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Martine, and if you are new here, I do videos on astrology, mainly from the Vedic perspective, although I also use tropical insights, and I focus on relationship and natal astrology. And if you are new here and you like this video and would like to hear similar videos on astrology from me, please like, subscribe. I'll hit the notifications bells to see when I will post the next video. And also, if you are interested in a personal consultation, I do consultations on relationship and natal astrology, various topics. Please email me at the email address that I will write in the video description. Thank you. And to get into today's topic, this is going to be a video that I said I was going to make a while ago, namely about how to see if you are going to have a foreign spouse. Namely, it shows predestination to some extent, but also interest in having a foreign spouse or interest in foreign cultures when it comes to your choice of partner. So I'm going to try to keep it as concise as possible because this is a pretty lengthy subject. So I have just pointed out basically a list of things that you want to check in the natal chart and a point system that I have created to see exactly how likely you are to end up with a foreign spouse or long-term partner. But before I get into it, just a short introduction. So, foreign spouse and, so the main indicator of foreign things in general in astrology is Rahu. I may have mentioned this before in previous videos. And if you want to see if you're going to have like a foreign spouse, you want to look for Rahu connections to the planets and points that show the partner archetype, namely Venus for men, Jupiter for women, Darakaraka for both genders. So Darakaraka is the planet with the lowest degree in your natal chart. And also seventh house ruler, aspects to the seventh house. And pretty much, also to a lesser degree to the fifth house and Mars, because the fifth house rules romance. So fifth house is basically dating without the marriage. It's, courtship, romance. So it can show technically short-term partnerships or partnerships that do not end up in marriage. So you want to look for Rahu involvement with the fifth house. And for women, to a lesser extent than Jupiter, you want to look for Mars, because Mars is the so-called boyfriend archetype. Meaning, again, Mars kind of can show the kind of man that a woman will find attractive, but will not necessarily deem fit for a husband or a long-term partner. Because Mars is kind of like the adventurous bad boy archetype, whereas Jupiter is wisdom and joy and spiritual knowledge, and it also signifies children, which is something that most women want in a relationship. So yeah, and on the other hand, Venus is the wife for men. Men just get one dispositor. Like, they only get Venus. In tropical astrology, I know that they also looked at moon, but in Vedic astrology, they don't use that, and I've stopped using it since I stopped using tropical astrology that much, because the moon shows, like, your mind and your personality in Vedic astrology, so there's no need to overcomplicate things. When it comes to a man's chart, just look for Venus as the archetype, aside from also looking at the Darakaraka, which goes for both genders, and all the other dispositors which show the partner archetype in one's chart, which I'm going to discuss step by step in a few moments. Also, aside from Rahu, which is like the single most important significator of foreign things, all things foreign, exotic, non-conforming, basically alien, you also want to look for the 12th house and the 9th house, because the 12th house shows long distance travel. Literally, the 12th house is truly foreign land, like, totally different culture and from your own, which is the first house. The first house is basically your house of status quo, of your country of birth, of basically your entire physical circumstances at birth are shown by the first house. So the 12th house is literally 12 places away from your status quo, aka natal country. So the 12th house is really far away land. When you talk about 12th house, you are definitely talking about totally different cultures or different continents, that kind of thing. The 9th house also shows foreign travel, but not so much. It shows maybe travel within the same continent and different foreign cultures, but it's not as alien as the 12th house, and it generally doesn't show as much foreign influence as the 12th house. Like 9th house is something like, traveling from France to Russia or something, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not entirely different. Like, there's usually some more common denominators between those cultures. And so that's pretty much it. To a lesser degree, I would also say Jupiter and Sagittarius kind of might show foreign influence, but I would not necessarily count that in. For oversimplification, not oversimplification, just simplification. Basically, for a pragmatic approach, you don't really want to count Jupiter as an influence. But generally, when I see a chart that has a lot of Jupiter influence, that will kind of make me believe that this person might get involved with people from foreign lands, simply because Jupiter is a planet that shows tolerance and the brotherhood of man and spirituality and all this stuff. So basically, when you see a person who has a strong Jupiter, they're definitely, unless Jupiter is debilitated, if Jupiter is debilitated, you might get a neo-Nazi. Just kidding. Hopefully not. But if Jupiter is in a relatively good spot, not in an enemy sign, not severely debilitated in your chart, then a person with a lot of Jupiter influence, like Jupiter conjunctions, placed in one of the cardinal houses, the 1st, the 4th, the 7th, or the 10th, this will make a person pretty open-minded and tolerant, and it would lead me to believe that they are likely to marry outside of their culture, simply because they do not even pay attention to this stuff, you know what I'm saying? Whereas somebody who has like a very strong Saturn, for instance, especially in certain house placements, can actually show a person who will care a lot about their local traditions and their culture and their religion and all that stuff. So just an overall thought. But I digress. So these are the basic general ideas when it comes to what would make a person interested in a foreign partner. So without further delaying, I'm gonna get into the actual list. So I have made a list of, get your pen and paper ready for this one. I mean, if you want. I've also prepared a few examples after that. I hope this is not going to be too long of a video. So yeah, the list that I made, similarly to what I have talked about in the video that I made on whether a person likes older or younger spouses. So I made a list of what I think is, a good calculation of preference, meaning to calculate how much of a preference a person has towards marrying a foreign spouse or ending up with a foreign spouse / long-term partner. So in a woman's chart, like I said, Jupiter is the husband. Mars is the boyfriend. So you want to look for, so like I mentioned in the beginning, right? You want to look for Jupiter for women, and by the same token, you want to look for Venus in a man's chart. These are the significators of the husband and wife, respectively. And then, equally important, you want to look for Dara Karaka, which is the planet with the lowest degree in your chart, which also signifies your soulmate and the kind of archetype that you're going to be attracted to in this life. And on the same level, you also want to look for 7th house. So planets in the 7th house, or aspecting the 7th house. And then also you want to look for planets, 7th house ruler. So the lord of the 7th house. If Aries is in the 7th house, meaning if you're a Libra ascendant, then Mars is going to be the ruler of your 7th house. So you want to look for any aspects, conjunctions to Mars in your chart. And yeah, this is it. So basically it's like 4 main things that you want to look for. Now, the actual point system. So give yourself, or the person whose chart you are looking at, 2 points for having Rahu in the 7th house. Rahu in the 7th house, I think, without a doubt, is the strongest indicator that somebody's going to end up with a foreign spouse. Because Rahu, again, all things foreign. And the 7th house is the house of your husband or partner. Not your husband/wife. Depends on what the preference is. And so it's basically the house of marriage, of romantic partner, even business partnerships, but we're not going to get into other areas that the 7th house signifies. Right now, we're just interested in the spouse aspect. So, Rahu in the 7th house, give yourself 2 points. Give yourself 2 points also if Rahu is conjunct the 7th house ruler. Then, if Rahu is conjunct Dara Karaka, so like if the planet with the lowest degree in your chart is the moon and you have Rahu conjunct the moon, give yourself 2 points. Rahu conjunct... Wait. The heck did I... Oh, yeah. So, in a woman's chart, Rahu conjunct Jupiter, 2 points, because Jupiter is the husband archetype for a woman. In a man's chart, Rahu conjunct Venus, 2 points. 7th house ruler in the 12th house, give yourself 2 points. So again, if your descendant or 7th house falls in Aries, right, the ruler of your 7th is going to be Mars. If Mars falls in the 12th house or in the 9th house, give yourself 2 points for a foreign spouse. Foreign spouse, not foreign spouse. Foreign spouse. Again, equally, by the same token, Dara Karaka in the 12th house or the 9th house, give yourself 2 points. Jupiter in the 12th house or 9th house for women, give yourself 2 points. Venus in a man's chart in the 12th house or the 9th house, also give yourself 2 points. Last but not least, if the 7th house ruler is conjunct the ruler of the 12th house or the 9th house, also give yourself 2 points. Right. So these are like these ones with the 2 points. These are the high likelihood of a foreign spouse. Okay, there are other aspects that I'm gonna get into right now, but these are the most important ones, with the ones with two points. Then if you've checked all of these, you don't see anything, you want to look for 7th ruler aspected by the ruler of the 12th or the 9th house. When I mean aspected, I'm talking about any aspect except conjunction, right? Because I mentioned conjunction in the first category. So for instance, also, like I've mentioned this before, remember that in Vedic astrology, the planets do not cast the usual aspects. In Vedic astrology, all planets, which span from Jupiter to Saturn, according to traditional Vedic astrology, they all give the conjunction and the opposition, which means they aspect the first house, which is the conjunction, and the seventh house from themselves, right? So if you have Jupiter in the first house, it will be opposite the seventh house, so it will aspect the seventh house. That's how you say it. Even if there is no planet in the seventh house, you say that Jupiter aspects the seventh house. Right. And aside from this, so every one of those 7 planets have the conjunction and the opposition, or or first and seventh aspects from themselves. And Rahu and Ketu as well. Rahu meaning north node of the moon, and Ketu meaning south node of the moon. These are all of the points and planets that you want to look at. And aside from this, several planets cast so-called special aspects, meaning, let me think which one of them. So Mars aspects the 4th house from itself, the 7th house from itself, like all the other planets, and the 8th house from itself. And each of these aspects actually has a different kind of nuance to it, and a different weightage, if you will. The 4th house is actually, when it comes to Mars, for instance, the 4th aspect is actually more powerful than the 7th. I'm not even 100% sure why, but this is like the traditional theory. This is something to do with, the 4th placement for Mars is about what you protect and what you fight for and all this stuff. But just to, I digress. But basically, you need to remember Mars aspects the 1st, the 4th, the 7th, and the 8th houses from itself, or signs. Because if you use a whole sign system, which I use with sidereal zodiac, sign and house coincides, Because, if you have first house in Aries, that means that Aries spans your first house. You're not going to have Aries in the first and the second house, for instance, which can happen if you use tropical and Placidus house system like most Western astrologers use. Just, again, another parenthesis. Right, so Mars aspects. Then Jupiter aspects the 1st, the 5th, the 7th, and the 9th from itself. Saturn aspects the 3rd, the 7th, and the 10th houses from itself. And Rahu and Ketu aspect just like Jupiter, so they aspect the 1st, the 5th, the 7th, and the 9th houses from themselves. And Rahu is particularly important because, remember, that's the main indicator of foreign spouses. So you want to look for aspects. Right, so back to my list, the 1-point category. So if the 7th house ruler is aspected by the ruler of the 12th house or the 9th house, give yourself 1 point, or the person whose chart you're reading for. Rahu aspecting the 7th house, give yourself 1 point. So, for instance, Rahu is in the 1st house, it aspects the 7th by the 7th aspect. If Rahu is, let me think, I think in the 3rd house, right? 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, yeah. So if Rahu is in the 3rd house, aspects the 7th house by 5th aspect, give yourself 1 point. Just a few examples. Then Rahu aspecting the 7th house ruler, give yourself 1 point. So for instance, if the 7th house is in Pisces, and so the 7th house ruler is going to be Jupiter, right? And you have Jupiter in the 5th house and Rahu in the 1st house. Rahu is going to aspect Jupiter by 5th aspect. So give yourself 1 point because it's an influence on the 7th house ruler. Then Rahu aspecting Dharakaraka. Again, by 5th, by 7th, or by 9th aspect. If it's a conjunction, it's a 2-point category. Rahu aspecting Jupiter or Mars for women. I added Mars here, but, remember Mars is a little bit of a different influence. I would say, for instance, if you have somebody who has, in a woman's chart, If you have, let's say, Rahu conjunct Mars, it will show that you will be attracted to men who are of foreign origin. But unless there's also a influence from Rahu to Jupiter, it could just show that maybe you're going to have a fling with a foreign man, but it's not going to end up in marriage. You know what I'm saying? By the same token, if you have Rahu just influencing the 5th house, but not the 7th house, same thing. And this goes for both men and women when it comes to the 5th house. You could have a person, let's say, like, again, if you have Rahu in the 5th house, for instance, it could show that you're going to have flings with people from foreign cultures, but it may not show long-term relationships. Or again, kind of similarly to what I talked about in the late marriage aspect, meaning I talked about the fact that if you don't have love marriage aspects. So again, you need to understand that all of these things are influenced. So like there's nothing set in stone. So if you have Rahu in the 5th, let's say, but it doesn't aspect the 7th, there's no law of physics that is going to keep you from marrying a person of foreign origin. But unless you have Rahu aspecting the 7th, it could also show that the marriage is not going to last. Similarly to what I described there in the issue of love marriage, and love marriage aspects. This is just, a little parenthesis. For instance, again, I think Angelina Jolie has Rahu in the 5th house, and if I'm not mistaken, she married an actor who was English, but the marriage only lasted like 2 years or something. Actually, all her marriages ended up in divorce because she doesn't have the love marriage aspects, but anyway, maybe not the best example, but I think you get the general idea, right? Right, so continuing with the 1 point category. Rahu aspecting 7th house rulers, talked about that. Rahu aspecting Darakarka, Rahu aspecting Jupiter Mars, right, that's where I started, right? Thus endeth the parenthesis. Then Rahu aspecting Venus for men. Same thing, give yourself 1 point. So like, if a man has Venus in the 5th house and he has Rahu in the 1st house, then Rahu will aspect Venus by 5th aspect. So give yourself 1 point, or him. Also, a little observation. If the ruler of the 7th house is the same planet as the ruler of the 12th house or the 9th house, also give yourself 1 point. For instance, again, like I said in the Jupiter example, remember that in Vedic astrology, there's no Pluto, there's no Uranus, there's no Neptune. So Pisces is ruled entirely by Jupiter, and so is Sagittarius. So you're going to have 2 houses that are ruled by the same planet. And that's actually, in a way, similar to a conjunction, because you have 2 areas of life ruled by the same thing. So if you have this, again, give yourself 1 point. Like if Jupiter rules your 7th and also your 12th or your 9th, I'm not even sure what instances, what the sign positions could be for this to happen, because I'm sure that there are some very limited situations when this could happen. But this is the general rule. So yeah, give yourself 1 point if you have that situation. And also, to a lesser extent, give yourself approximately 0.5 if you have Jupiter in the 7th, Jupiter aspecting any of the partner significators in your chart. Meaning, if you have Jupiter aspecting Darakarka, or Venus, or 7th house ruler, or the 7th house. To a lesser extent, because it goes hand in hand with what I talked about earlier, about Jupiter showing somebody who's going to be open-minded and tolerant towards people of foreign culture. But unless you have like a lot of Rahu or 12th house, 9th house mixing with the 7th house significator, I would say it's negligible. Especially if you also have a strong Saturn. So this was my list, and now let me get into the examples. I actually looked for Melania Trump, but unfortunately her time of birth was not known, so I couldn't use her. But I did use Ivana Trump, who was, I think, I'm not even sure, was she the first wife? I have no idea, honestly. I know that she was Donald Trump's main wife, like she was the one who helped him with his business and the mother of his children and all that, at least most of them. So Ivana Trump was born in the Czech Republic, like many of you maybe have heard, and she is a model, or was a model, and married Trump. So obviously this is a case of a foreign spouse, right? And so what I found in her chart, her ascendant is in Scorpio. If the time birth provided by astrotheme.com is correct, and I assume that it is, then her ascendant falls in Scorpio. Jupiter is in the second house in Sagittarius. Jupiter is the husband in a wife's chart. Ruler of the seventh, Venus in Capricorn, conjunct Mercury. But these are just details. Rahu is in the sixth house in Aries, and it aspects Jupiter by ninth aspect. So 1 point. Why? Because Jupiter is in her second house and Rahu is in the sixth. Aspects by ninth aspect, 1 point. Then Venus is ruler of the 12th house as well as the 7th house, another 1 point. So 2 points preference. Again, with these point systems, it doesn't necessarily mean, obviously, that if you absolutely 200% are going to marry somebody from a foreign origin if you have some of these. But I would say the more aspects you have, the more likely you are to marry somebody of a foreign origin or end up in a long-term relationship with somebody of a foreign origin at least once in your life. At least this is based on my observation. By the way, I've used this technique on a lot of people, and people that I also know in real life, and actually even people in my family who ended up marrying foreigners. So believe me, this works. And okay, so this was Ivana Trump. By the same token, or similarly, I had to look at the husband's chart, right? Because the husband also married foreign, Donald Trump. His ascendant is in Leo. Saturn, which is the ruler of the 7th house, falls in Cancer in the 12th house. Conjunct Venus in Cancer. So, this is a doozy. Like, he has, like, all of these all together, and they're all signifying foreign spouse. So, let me back up a little bit. So, let me break it down, actually. He has ruler of the 7th house, Saturn, in the 12th house. Already 2 points. Venus in the 12th house, 2 points, because Venus is the wife in a man's chart. And then on top of that, he has these two conjunct, meaning Saturn is conjunct Venus, and Saturn is his Darakaraka, and it falls in his 12th house. 2 points. So in total, he has 6 points. I didn't even check the rest of the chart, because already with 6 points, it clearly shows a strong preference for a foreign spouse. Yeah. I mean, and again, here you can kind of see, because Trump, I think probably he had tons of affairs and tons of girlfriends, but he really only married foreigners, which, again, kind of goes hand in hand with his chart. Then I checked Prince Rainier of Monaco and his wife, Grace Kelly. May she rest in peace. I'm not sure. Is he still alive? I'm not sure. Probably not. Anyway, but they were married. You probably know the story. If you don't know, you can certainly look for it. They were very publicized. Grace Kelly, great Hollywood actress, married the Prince of Monaco, moved to Europe. Classic case of foreign marriage. So Prince Rainier had ascended in Gemini, conjunct Sun, conjunct Mercury. 7th ruler is Jupiter, because his ascendant is in Gemini. Already, because the 7th ruler is Jupiter, I would say give 0.5 points. So people who have descendant in Sagittarius or Pisces already have a bit of a tendency to end up with somebody from a foreign culture. Rahu in the 3rd house in Leo, aspecting the 7th house. 1 point. Rahu aspecting Venus in the 11th house, 1 point. Because Jupiter is in Libra Jupiter is in Libra, ruler of the 7th house. Okay. Oh, right. I can't even understand my own handwriting. So, what I did try to tell myself through the passage of time from yesterday to today is that Rainier had a connection between the 7th house and the 5th house rulers. Remember, I talked about this in the love marriage. This is like a side note. It's not about today's topic, but as a side note, remember I mentioned about love marriage in the video I made on late marriage, and connection between 5th house ruler and 7th house rulers is the strongest significator of a love marriage, and he has it. So yeah, I found it interesting that both of them, Prince Rainier and Grace Kelly, had love marriage aspects, which kind of makes sense because they definitely had a love marriage, right? He should have probably married royalty if it were to be something that he did out of family duty, but he married Grace Kelly because he was obviously in love with her. So overall, Prince Rainier has 2.5 points preference for a foreign spouse. Again, with this kind of points, these points, it could have gone either way, but clearly he did end up marrying a foreign spouse, so it must have been enough for the ultimate move to be towards marrying the foreign spouse. Let me think, what else? Yeah, that's it, pretty much. So, moving on to Grace Kelly. Her ascendant was in Libra, conjunct Venus, conjunct Sun, conjunct Mercury. Ruler of the 7th house is Mars, sits in Scorpio in the 2nd house. Rahu in the 7th house alone. She gets 2 points. This is like pretty much it. This is it. So, yeah, in her case, wait a second, Jupiter in the... Yeah, okay. So in her case, she just has Rahu in the 7th house alone. So she gets 2 points for this. But some other things that I wrote here, kind of a parenthesis, is the fact that she also has a lot of, understandably, she also has a lot of aspects that are going to show settling abroad. Let me think. Ruler of the 8th house. Right, she had Mars in the 2nd house. This is a totally different topic, so I'm not going to get into it now. But yeah, she has a lot of aspects that show that she is very likely going to move abroad at some point. Because, yeah. Whereas in Prince Rainier's chart, you don't really see it, which, again, makes sense because he didn't move abroad. So he married the foreign spouse in his own land. And in his chart, you can kind of see that because the ruler of the ascendant, which is Mercury, is conjunct the ascendant. So the ruler of the 1st house sits in the 1st house. That's pretty much a strong indicator that you are not going to move abroad. If you want to see moving abroad, you want to see connections between 12th house, 9th house, and 7th to a lesser extent. Yeah, but that's it. So, okay, moving on. But all in all, so both of them have over 2 points, which I would say is good enough to point out to the fact that you might very well end up with a foreign spouse. And last but not least, the third couple I have looked at is Catherine Zeta-Jones and Michael Douglas. This is a good one again. Catherine Zeta-Jones the first thing that I noticed with her, and I mentioned this in the older/younger spouse analysis that I made, Saturn, she has Saturn in the 7th house, which clearly shows a preference for an older spouse. And she also has, let me think, Mercury, so her ascendant is in Scorpio. Mercury rules the, no, so her ascendant, wait, is in Scorpio. Yeah, Libra falls into her 12th house. So Venus, which is the ruler of the 12th house, is also the ruler of the 7th house. She gets 1 point for this. Yeah, because the 7th house, her ascendant being in Scorpio, means her 7th house falls in Taurus, and her 12th house falls in Libra. Both of those are ruled by the same planet, aka Venus. So she gets 1 point for the connection between the 12th and the 7th houses. And she also has Rahu in Aquarius in the 4th house. Conjunct Moon, I might add. Aspects Venus in Leo by 7th aspect. Darakaraka is the Moon, and it is conjunct Rahu in Aquarius in the 4th house. 2 points. And then also Rahu aspecting Venus, another 1 point. So in total, she has 4 points. Aside from also having several aspects that pretty much show that she is likely going to move abroad. Yeah, so she has 4 points. That is a very strong indicator of a foreign spouse. And the other one who has like over 4 points is Donald Trump, as far as I have checked. Both of them married foreigners. And not just foreigners, people from other continents. Okay, and then Michael Douglas. Ascendant in Libra, Venus in the 1st house. Mars is in Virgo. Mars is the ruler of his 7th house. And it sits in the 12th house in Virgo. 2 points. And Rahu aspects Venus, and which is his wife, because he's a man. But it also happens to be his Darakaraka. So 2 points. Again, 4 points. See, with Douglas, he actually, I think if I'm not mistaken, he had another wife, right? Before Catherine Zeta, Deirdre, I think her name was. Yeah, so, and she was, I don't know, I haven't actually researched her, but I think she was an American, is an American. So, yeah. But he had this short-lived marriage with somebody who was not a foreigner, and then his long-term marriage is with somebody who is a foreigner. Yeah, I rest my case. So, these are the examples that I have found. If you have any others, I would love to hear from them. Like, any comments, anything that you want to add. And, yeah, I hope I've mentioned everything that I wrote down. Because, like, I do notes because I'm old-fashioned. Yeah, I think so. If not, I will mention everything in a future video. So this is it. This has been my analysis for whether a person is going to end up with a foreign spouse or not. Once again, please leave feedback, comments, anything, maybe suggestions for future videos. Again, I have not forgotten that I still have to do the Venus in Pisces video. I will make that hopefully this week, if not the next one. And after that, I was thinking about making a series on Jupiter, but I'm not sure. I haven't really decided how to organize that and which parts I want to prioritize and how I'm gonna see. But like, if you have any suggestions, please leave comments below. And again, if you like the video, please like, please subscribe, please hit the notifications bell to see when I will post the next video. And again, if you're interested in a personal consultation, please email me at the email that I will leave in the video description. And this was it. Thank you.